slash. That's messed up. Okay. All right. Here we go. First one. Aggregate demand, aggregate supply at long run or full employment equilibrium. Okay, that means a healthy economy. So we're going to start with our basic graph. We have price level, real GDP, and you have to put the R because that means we're subtracting inflation. I can zoom in a little bit. Okay. Now we need, and if you want to, you can just mark through these as you add them. Price level, GDP. I've got long run aggregate supply, and that is where our economy will sit at full employment, which is labeled as YE for equilibrium or YF. So I can mark that one off. I got my long run supply. I've got my downward sloping aggregate demand. Got my upward sloping short run supply. And where all three of these cross is the level of prices that we have in our economy. This is what we want it to look like. This is what we want it to get to. In the long run, we're all going to have jobs. We're all going to buy things. And we want our businesses in the short run, those ups and downs of the business cycle, and our aggregate demand when all these jobs are filled at our full employment level of output. So this is an economy that has no recession. It's fictitious. It has 100% employment. And everything is meeting right here in the middle. So if you're supposed to do a long run adjustment, just remember it needs to get back to long run somehow. So all three crossing. All right. Our next type of economy is an economy in a recession. That means it has some unemployment. It's suffering from a recession, whatever the verbiage that's used in the question tells you. Okay. I'm going to start with the structure of my economy again. You got price level, got GDP, got my long run aggregate supply, I got my full employment. So my full employment level of GDP is right here. So if we're in a recession, remember you increase right and decrease left. So are we below or above full employment in a recession? We're below full employment. It means we have less than full employment. So our businesses and our consumers, our aggregate demand, they are going to be, this is called short run equilibrium. Where this short run crosses aggregate demand, that still is equilibrium because that's where supply and demand meet. However, they're not meeting at full employment. So our level of GDP production is at this part on the y-axis. It's to the left of full employment. We can still exist. We still buy things at a price level even when people don't have jobs. So I go up here, I got price level, GDP, got full employment, long run supply, aggregate demand, short run supply, my short run equilibrium, price, and level of output. Got those, got those. So this is an economy in recession. This is not a clothing store, but it is a recessionary gap. So if we want to make 20 trillion in GDP, we're not making that right here, are we? That's less. So the amount of GDP that we don't have, if we want to make 20 trillion this year and we're making 19 trillion, then we have a GDP or recessionary gap of $1 trillion, don't we? And somehow, if it doesn't fix itself, we'd need a policy or something to make it get back to here. Okay? So that is a recession. Now, we'll set up our economy again. We have our long run supply. We have our full employment output. We have our x-axis of real GDP, y-axis of price level. So now I have inflation. Inflation means that we are actually overproducing like we did in the Great Depression, the roaring 20s, the factories were rolling. When we use resources, stuff gets scarce and therefore prices go up. So now we have our short run aggregate supply, and we have our aggregate demand. They're in short run equilibrium, but they are past full employment. So we're producing at a point further than our full employment GDP. We still sit at a short run equilibrium price level, and now we have an inflationary gap. So in order to solve that one, we're going to need something contractionary. Here we think something green, and here we got to think something red to slow it down. So through my checklist, I got my price level, got my real GDP, got my full employment, long run supply, aggregate demand, short run supply, short run equilibrium, price, and Y. Y is the current level of output, or current GDP production, which is right here. So I got that one, I got that one, knocked all these out. So now I have what I want it to be at equilibrium, a recession, and we have inflation. So those are our three versions of how our economy can begin, and we either need to fix it or something bad could happen to it and make this become one of these. Okay?